Welcome to the Balance Hormone Solution podcast. If you're a woman, 35 plus, feeling exhausted, struggling to lose weight, and wondering where your libido went, this is for you. I am Tracy Aaron, a functional medicine practitioner who helps women balance their hormones naturally without prescriptions, guesswork, or trendy nonsense. Because here's the truth. Your symptoms aren't random. They're signals. And if you know how to listen, you can fix the root cause and start feeling like yourself again. If you're ready for real solutions, let's get to it. Today, we have a very special guest, my friend Emily Tant, who is a fellow homeschool mom. She has 5 children that she is still homeschooling, actually, all the way through to marriage and even a grandbaby now. So we are going to have an exciting conversation today about the journey through mold illness. And Emily has a powerful story to share with us. And I can't wait to dive into the background of how this insidious moment in time comes to wreak havoc in our bodies, whether we're aware of it or not. And we need a tremendous amount of awareness around this concept of mold, which sometimes is unseen. And let's get to the bottom of that and how we can learn what resources we have available to us and how we can make it through to the other side. And so, Emily, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Tracy. I'm excited to have a conversation about something I have a conversation about a lot.
It's interesting how once you've been through something, the doors open for other people flock to you. And they look at you for hope. They come to you for answers. And when you've been through something as, I don't know, is it fair to say traumatic, as in-depth, as intense as mold illness, it's something you don't just get over. It's something you don't just forget. And you learn so much along the way that it's hard to keep your mouth quiet about it. If you see somebody else suffering, I feel like you want to be that lighthouse that is sharing information. Look, you don't have to suffer to the depths that I did too. That's how I felt anyway. But so I'm so glad that you are a resource for your community and even for people who come to you and want a help on a pathway forward. So let's start at the beginning. Like, tell me about your journey. Some of this I'll be hearing. I'm familiar with a little bit of your journey, but a lot of this is brand new to me too. So I can't wait. Start wherever you want to start, but just kind of paint the picture for me. Like, when did you first realize something was wrong? This was beyond the seasonal cold, flu. This was something bigger, deeper. What was that like for you?
So it's interesting because if when I talk about my mold journey, when I knew it was mold, that's much more recent, like in the last 6 or so years. But if I start at the beginning and say, your question, when did you know something was off? I would go back to high school, really. I moved to Nashville at 14 and had really not really any big issues prior to that. We moved into a house, and hindsight's everything. Moved into a house on a road called Springdale Drive, ironically. And the spring was actually in the house or in the yard of the home that we rented for a couple of years. And looking back in that home, the basement had just visible fuzzy mold growing all on it.
Mm-hmm.
The connection was never made that this was impacting health. And so it was sometime after that, we moved to another house that I don't remember as much of an obvious thing, but needless to say, from maybe 16 on, I would just end up at the doctor and not having answers. And it would be something like tightness in my chest. And they would say, well, I think it's pleurisy, but there would never be any solution, or there would never really even be an answer about why or what. Let me think, we got a little bit down there. A lot of times it was just achiness. Maybe more in college, I would just feel like achy body and shoulders and just tiredness. I remember going to a doctor and they would be like, well, you almost meet all of whatever the number of symptoms are for things like chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia, which really is no diagnosis anyway, but it was along those lines of that kind of that pathway.
Did you have siblings too? Did you grow up with,
Siblings,
and did anybody else have any symptoms?
you know, it's interesting to think back, uh, different, maybe some different type things, but nothing glaringly obvious. I we grew up like we were a very kind of crunchy family growing up. We were homeschooled. We didn't eat sugar. My mom baked bread. Kind of, it's
Hmm.
funny now. I kind of laugh because it's trendy now. And so but we were always very alternative, kind of in with medicine. And I was after I graduated, I started doing a program. It was Clayton School of Natural Health. It was like correspondence school because we didn't have, we didn't have the Zoom stuff any back then. And that was always my passion, was to do that kind of stuff and help people. I found this was around age 19. We found a Chinese medicine doctor in North Carolina who sent a bunch of stuff, and it really helped me, really helped kind of go that path. You and I share another doctor experience. I feel like I've been very blessed to have, definitely over the last 20 years, some people who've kept me from drowning as far as
Hmm.
symptoms that I look back and know that mold was a part of. That was very, very helpful. I think
Yeah.
after I got married, I was super healthy, super great, moved into a great house, started having babies right away. I, when I was pregnant with my third, I was 25, I guess, something like that. And it was 2001. It was the first time my husband and I had gone on a trip together, and we went to New York City, and it happened to be September 10th that we got there. And the next day we all,
Oh, wow. You
and
were there in the city?
we were. And it's a weird way to relate this to mold, but when you talk about the impact that trauma plays in all aspects of your life, it was awful. I had a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old at home, and I was 17 weeks pregnant, and it was an escape issue. It was scary. It was the most traumatizing thing I've ever really gone through. And we made it to safety, if you will, so to speak. We couldn't even get out of the city because there were, threats on all the bridges and all the things. And my body, like, even though I'd been like at that point, that was a really good season of health for me. At that moment, I felt that I was like probably losing the baby. Like your body just,
Mm.
everything was fine. He's great. He's 24 years old, 23 years old now. It's all great. But I do believe that, a lot of people will talk about things like genetics to mold susceptibility, genetics to those types of things. We always have the genes, we always have the things, and something is going to pull that trigger and cause an activation, whether it's COVID, whether it's, another stealth infection or something, or a trauma. And I think the things that did, even though I wasn't living in mold at that time, I think it set me on a trajectory of dealing with things that were maybe already built up in my body, because there are genetic components that cause 25% of the population to not be able to properly process biotoxins, including mold, mycotoxins. And so maybe those things were stored up, maybe. And so at that point, after that, it took me a couple of years to kind of go, the fear that I was living in and feeling was not normal. And that is certainly a trauma issue. But there's a way that I feel like they intersect and relate. Again, in my 20s, I was like, all these pregnancies, you nurse for a couple of years, so your hormones are always up and down. And I was super healthy. I felt really great most of the time, but I would have these times where anxiousness, I guess, would take over, and it would be like, but it would be things, I actually went and talked to a therapist, and I think my faith, like I knew in my head the right things and the right answers, and that God's in control of whatever the things I was anxious over. And I just knew there was something missing. I knew there was something like, this is not a rational thing for me to go discuss and get fixed. There's something
Yeah.
else going on here. And so fast forward, we had this house that we lived in when I had my last baby in it. Well, actually the last two. We lived there for about 14 years. And we just kind of had, it was kind of comical how many different water instances in our home, water damage instances, from an overflowing toilet that damaged all the downstairs wood floors due to a root growing in the back, and it punctured something and backed up everything, to a major refrigerator. We probably in a couple of years had about 3 big things, not including, boys with a bathroom that they would spill water out of the bathtub and those types. And so about 14 years ago that we had some issues. And again, even 20, I would be working with a homeopathic doctor in California, and she helped me a lot with my hormones and dealing with what I thought was only hormonal. Now I'm just like, I think there was an underlying thing as well.
Right.
But I just remember about 14 years ago, we knew we had some mold issues. We could see some visible mold. And so we hired somebody that we thought was a good person to come check it out. She came to our house, pretty much gave us a clean bill of health, but I didn't know the impact that it could or was having on myself, and then ultimately some of my kids as well.
Right.
We continued to live in that house, and it would be things like waking up with your heart pounding, waking up and just feeling, and again, that was not necessarily linked to like I'm thinking about something really scary or really bad. It would just
Right.
random. And so that's where I mean the connection, the emotional, yes, it's in your head, if you will, but there was just something bigger. Pain, weird pains, ice pick shooting pains, vision disturbances like eye floaters and things like that. But I'm just like, these aren't normal. Like I said, heart palpitations. I look back now. So that was like about 14 years ago. We had kids in that house. All things came to a head more when we moved 6 years ago, almost exactly. And so a lot of those things that I was just curious about, trying to figure out, thankfully, we have some really good alternative doctors that were keeping our bodies in the best place they could possibly be from a health standpoint. But I do look back and wish I'd known what I know now about just some of the things that my kids were dealing with. A couple of them had some learning issues. We had a couple of like bedwetting issues. Nosebleeds are another big thing we dealt with, not that much, but just things that I chalked up to, this is just how they are. This is just who they are.
Right. And the thing is, you're not describing the typical symptoms, which people usually blame on mold, which is allergy, runny nose, postnasal drip, cough, that kind of thing. Doesn't sound like you guys even experienced that.
No, I will say, one part I will say that is almost like that. Okay, so I think that the difference is mold versus the toxins that mold produce.
Yes.
And so when you have a mycotoxin, that molds different, there's lots of different kinds of molds, and they produce a lot of different kinds of mycotoxins. And they're just that, they're toxic. And so we really didn't have that many allergies. I have one son who has some allergies, things that could have been like that. He would go through a season where, stuff would bloom, and I think things were just, maybe it was too much on his body or whatever. And no, like those were not my symptoms. I will, however, before we moved, and again, we had an upstairs that was fully carpeted. I had 5 kids. When I look back and think about that, the carpet was disgusting. It probably held God only knows what kind of dirt and dust and toxins. But I do remember about the month or so before we moved, I was cleaning out like under our bed. I was cleaning out in the closets, and it did stir up dust. Mold, dust, all of that would kind of do it. So the story was, we moved to a house, it's a great house in downtown Franklin, 100 years old. From the day we moved in, and again, we had experienced in that season, this was 2019, December of 19, a lot of hard things. So there was definitely trauma. My dad died the year before, and we were closing down a business. There was just a lot. And my brother-in-law was going through cancer treatment, and he was 40. and my granddad died the day we moved in here. It was just a lot of family things. And so we move in, and the first couple of nights, I don't remember which, I would wake up in the middle of the night and I just like couldn't breathe. So we moved into this new house, and it was 100 years old, and I wanted to make sure that with our home inspection at closing or whatever, that they did some extra mold testing, but I didn't really know what that needed to look like, and they really didn't do a good job because they found nothing. We move in on basically the day after Thanksgiving, and I would backtrack a little bit and say, I think I said this a little bit ago, but having moved and cleaned out the other house, I was already feeling some things, like probably more of an allergy reaction to dust and mold spores. But when we moved into this house, I couldn't sleep in it, and ended up going to my mom's, and we got some people that we thought might be better mold people to come look at it and to see if that was part of it. What we found was there had been a renovation just a month or two prior to us moving in, and in one of the master bathroom closets, which was mine, it had a lot of shelving. It's a great closet. But they basically did the renovation, put up MDF particle board in the closet, didn't seal it, and then come to find out it looked like the people that worked there probably cut the MDF in the closet and then swept it up, threw it down the vent in the closet. So every time we would get, and so I was having a very strong reaction. I mean, it's a horrible substance. I was having a strong reaction to that.
Yeah.
That was the acute piece. So we had that all ripped out. We had it rebuilt, and that helped. That acute can't breathe.
Right.
I was still getting worse and not feeling well in the house. And so we found somebody who came about 4 times and did mold inspection, and they would come and they would go, yeah, we found something here. We're going to fix it.
Mm.
We put an HRV, we encapsulated the crawl space. We did a lot of good things,
Yeah.
but we were still having issues. And I know this is my health story, but my health story obviously involves my kids, and this is our mold story. But 4 years ago, one of my daughters, all of my kids did the same very rigorous tutorial that our kids are both involved in now. And she struggled with reading and comprehension and had some learning issues, but this was her third or so year of being involved in this program. And I just remember in January and February, they have to write a big thesis paper, and my husband would always help her with that. And again, this is the third time she's done it. And I just remember him telling me, it's like she's just not even an active participant. Like he said,
Wow.
I'm doing this on my own. I just feel like she's blank. And about that time, our teacher would send an email and say, hey, I need your journal entries. And I haven't gotten them. And that happened 2 or 3 times. And I remember going to her and being like, what's up? Why are you not doing this? And
Mm.
hopefully God gave me enough grace and wisdom to not jump down her throat like sometimes I want to do as a mom. Hey, why are you not doing your homework? But I could tell something was off. And the second time it happened, she looked at me and she said, Mom, when I get those emails, I read my screen and I don't even know what I'm supposed to do.
Wow.
And after that second time, this is probably, I don't know what time it is or what month it was, like March. I finally was like, something's gotta be checked out. So I went to the
Yeah.
garage and pulled out a crowbar and went upstairs. The two of our girls were up in a room, or the upstairs has beadboard, kind of cute little cubby, very quaint, old. And I just started pulling down beadboard. And this is after having maybe 2 different companies coming out 3 or 4 or 5 times. And it was just all black up there.
And let me ask you, would they do like air samples?
They did air samples. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I have mixed, yeah, I got mixed feelings about that type of mold testing.
And then they would investigate, they would look if there were certain areas that I could feel it or smell it and so, they found a little bit more than just through air samples, but yeah,
Yeah.
so I ended up doing an army. and it ended
Okay.
up being horrible.
Mm.
Where I would actually, let me backtrack just a little bit. So we moved in. She started getting bad, it was a year and a half later, I guess. At the previous home where I told you we had problems, and had a lot of them, my older daughter at the other house had some issues with, she ran cross country and she developed some exercise induced type asthma.
Hmm.
And so that would be a symptom, like you might say, well, that seems like more of a respiratory thing that fits. She did have that for a little while. And then her freshman year of college, she lived at home, went to Lipscomb, did fine her first semester. And her second semester, she basically had to sit out. And she got so sick. And her symptoms were very similar to mine in that they were just weakness, fatigue. I would say she was never officially diagnosed because we just kind of stopped going down that route with POTS or dysautonomia, but it was
Mm-hmm.
symptoms. And it was pretty severe. And so that was in the winter. And then over the summer, we started doing all the things we know to do, and she perked up a little bit. But when we moved to this old house, we had a front part and a back part. And the back house is where three of my older kids lived. It's disconnected from the front house just through a little porch, but it is a
Mm-hmm.
and separate building. When she moved here to this house, she got better because she got out of what she was being exposed to, and she was in a new space, if you will, because it was
Right.
a garage apartment and it was all clean and new. So the second daughter, who's upstairs in the front house, is the one that went downhill.
Right.
So find the mold, do the ERMI. It's off the charts. I found a guy, and he comes in, and I just remember standing on at my kitchen counter and saying, I don't know what the next step needs to be, but this is this is my ERMI. And he looks at me
Yeah.
like, we don't see him this bad very often, which was
Yeah.
like, I don't know if that's a relief or, like, okay, well, at least there's a reason. So needless
Right.
to say, I took out my two daughters who were living in the front house in that upstairs and myself, and we moved to the back part. And just back to your question about people thinking that mold issues are, nasal issues or
Right.
issues or respiratory issues. 9 days after I moved that daughter to the back house, and this is obviously before we really had any time to be doing any supplementing and detox and anything else. But 9 days later, she looked at me and she goes, Mom, I can feel my brain working again. And it was just shocking to me. Like, wow, thank you, God. And oh my word, she was still.
Yeah.
And so, it's been a journey. We've done some massive remediation. We have some really great people, I say, partners in health, partners in home that I'm so thankful for.
You're right.
And we've done it a couple of times. We had to get rid of a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
We filled up more dumpsters. And I think maybe you were talking about the symptoms, the hard parts. I mean, that would be my turning point about, okay, this is a big piece of the puzzle. And so what do we do? It was very hard emotionally. And I think also, because mold toxins impact your brain,
Yeah.
impact your emotions, affect your hormones, all of those things, brain fog. And especially what I'm talking about with my daughter, she couldn't even think to do her journal entries, much less,
Right.
having to have those issues and deal with creating a plan for how do we fix our home,
Yep.
family, deal with our things. We got rid of the majority of our stuff that we couldn't clean. We cleaned a lot, and then we've had several different remediations. And again, even last year, I think this is why it is so important, even after you have a successful remediation, is staying on top of it and continuing to check and continuing to listen to your body. I mean, I'm a canary for sure.
Mm-hmm.
My husband's dismay, but last fall, even our HVAC, after we had done this whole thing a couple of years before, we had two of the worst kinds of mold growing in the HVAC. And so stuff happens. And so it's a constant thing to be just watching.
How do you know when you're done? How do you know when you quote unquote found it all? You keep doing ERMI tests?
Yeah, you want to get a clean ERMI post remediation for sure. I think you listen to your body. I think for sure. What's also interesting is the daughter that was older that had the issues that moved out because she was sick and got better. My youngest daughter was up there and really had no symptoms until she moved out and until we started detoxing. And so different people hold
Yeah.
on to and react differently, number one. And her symptoms were more of like that came out maybe when she was unmasking, like her body finally felt safe enough.
Mm-hmm.
We had been doing mycotoxin urine tests and hers were nothing at the beginning. She was not releasing anything. And then, 6 months later, it's like, oh my gosh, these are ridiculously high numbers. But it was finally her body allowing it to herself, her to release and do that.
Right.
But yeah, I think, within a family, I think one of the things that I see a lot that's really sad and hard is it's easy if you move into a place and then, the next week, everybody in your family feels sick.
Mm-hmm.
But often what it is you live in an environment and everybody's okay. And then something, either you have a water issue or maybe there was already something there. And
Right.
one or two of the members have something go wrong. They get sick. They have something, a trauma, a surgery, a pregnancy, a something that activates and turns that gene on. And then all of a sudden they're sick. And it is because of the toxins in the home. It's finally affecting them. Their trauma bucket was, or their toxic load bucket was full.
Yeah.
And trauma causes this to overflow. And then all of a sudden they're experiencing these symptoms. And then they're married to some guy who's like, I don't know what's wrong with you. I
It's
feel,
perfectly fine. It happens all the time.
yes. Yeah.
It's easy to feel isolated. It's easy to feel like it's all in your head. It's easy to feel like, well, maybe this is just passing. But when when you're the only one who's sick in the house, and it's hard because you know how expensive remediation is and how emotional it is to get rid of maybe family heirlooms, old pictures, old books, things that you have an emotional attachment to. And then you got to go through all this in hopes that you'll get better. I've been there. It's so hard.
It is so hard. When I'm talking to people who are just like, I just don't even know what to do. It costs too
Mhm.
much money. I'm thankful we live in a nice house in downtown Franklin, and I'm grateful that we've had the means to fix the problem.
Mhm.
I I am so convinced that, well, it's not even that I'm convinced. I experienced the healing of it all, and knowing that when I'm in that environment, I'm so sick. I would move 3 hours away to the smallest town and buy the cheapest house and put all of my money into making it safe if that's what it required me to do to be well
Exactly.
financially, yeah.
Exactly. If you get your health back from mold, you realize there is no price tag too high to pay.
Yes, and you hear about people who are healing in tents out somewhere and
Yes. In the desert.
in the desert, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make common sense. People think it's crazy, but it makes sense when you've experienced that and you say,
Mhm.
"It's just worth it." And so, yeah, I think, when you talk about healing, number 1, I think, is definitely getting out of exposure, and you want your body to be able to get to a place where you can have amounts of mold exposure. If you go to the coffee shop or whatever, we are in a world where we have to go places, and I get that. I would say my ability to handle small things like that is a lot better, much better than it used to be. But the other piece of the healing deal that I feel like was really, really huge was the nervous system regulation. And that's why I keep talking about like 9/11 and the traumas and, that just the experience. I mean, goodness, going through a mold issue in your home is traumatic in and of itself. After my daughter, moved out and 9 days later felt her brain working, that was the beginning of summer or end of the school year. And so over the summer, she was doing we do a lot of kinesiology, muscle testing, knowing what her body needed supplement wise and detoxifying wise. But she was able to do it and not continuously be exposed to the problem. And so that was really helpful. And we noticed an improvement. At the end of the summer, though, she ended up doing lens neurofeedback. And when I tell you at this point, she was 16. And, sometimes your kids kind of go through, I guess, puberty at 12 or 13, and they kind of, their personality changes for a little bit, and then it kind of comes back. You're like, oh, it was all. I remember my husband and I looking at each other after she went through Lens, and like she was back to her old self from 5 years before. Like I didn't realize that even the bubbly, happy gone, and it was just so life changing. And so for several years, I feel like the two things I've tell everybody I wish I'd known 30 years ago was like we were always into healthy food. We were always into supplementing. And I'm thankful for that. The only other pieces are environmental, what you're breathing,
Yep.
and nervous system work. And I think, I've heard someone say about diet, I think as a culture, we're so much better about food. People are talking more about what we put in our bodies, which is so huge. But you can go how many days without food? You mean people stay fast. We can go that long without eating. We can go
Yeah.
few days without water. How long
Right.
can you go without breathing? You can't.
Exactly. Yeah.
So when you're living, I mean, it almost, after that, the shift was almost like, I would rather eat McDonald's and live in a clean,
Yeah.
seeing the difference that getting out of those toxic environments made.
Yeah.
So anyway, I've been a kind of an evangelist for the mold piece and also the neurofeedback piece. And the daughter, who's now 20, is actually just now starting. She's just been practicing doing lens neurofeedback. She finally, a couple of years after she went through it, she goes, "That's what I want to do. It was so helpful." And
Amazing.
that's a cool story in and of itself. But yeah, she's in Nashville treating people because it's so good for everything. But I just having your body, when your body is stuck in a position of like cell danger response
Yes.
or fight or flight or freeze, it can't heal properly, whether it's mold toxicity or anything else. And so I just think it's kind of one of those, like, everybody should do this.
How did you know whether or not you could stay in your house? How did you think, oh, well, maybe we're going to have to sell this place and move again?
Yes. I think, it's been a journey, and I'm, like I said, I don't know that it's ever we're always gonna have to be checking and seeing. I think where it came down to it is our building biologist. There are really good things about older homes. They breathe.
Yeah.
Part of the problem with mold, or with
Yes. Newer construction. Yeah.
newer
They get
construction,
locked in there.
we make them airtight. We build them with mold food, sheetrock, and they put all this stuff in it that actually creates more of a problem. And so I think once we got down the path a certain way, we were like, we're probably going to have to do this in any house that we get.
Yeah.
And we know this house, we know what it has been through, we know what we've done, and we know what to watch for.
Yes.
So that's where we are today. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a big piece of it.
Yeah, one of my doctors who helped me the most with my health journey ended up focusing on mold in the end. And one of the things that he said is, my main question is, can I get better in this environment, or do I need a new environment? That's the bottom line question, right? And he would say, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know.
Perfect. That's really smart.
Yeah, and I thought the same thing. Okay, we've looked enough behind every single wall. We've been under and on top of and inside everything. And I know what we're dealing with here. So the question is, like, can you fix what you're dealing with, or do you need to start over? But every time you start over, especially in Tennessee, I mean, I cannot tell you how many women who have a story that goes something like, and then I moved to Tennessee and got sick.
Yes.
That was my story. And I hear it all the time. It's not because I'm looking for it. There's and I have heard mold doctors in particular talk about the geographical region, particularly of this Tennessee Valley, of how it's a little bit like a fishbowl, and how, we've got those 3 stars on our state flag, and we've got the highlands, the midlands, and the lowlands, and here we are in the midlands, and how it's not just because we get more rain than Seattle every single year, although we do. It's It's the nature of our geography here. It's the rock bed that we build everything on. It's all the moisture, the humidity, the weather that will change in a minute, from sunny and then rain all night long, whatever. All these things create a perfect storm. If you've got these other things happening in your life, all you need is one little tiny trigger, and boom, you've got all these genetics turn on, and it really does feel like a nightmare begins. But you found a lot of people along the way to help you, to provide answers, to get you out of the danger zone. Like, what do you do now? Do you have air filters in rooms?
We have air filters everywhere. We have red.
Yes.
And we just, we've just decided that Eric Davis is going to come to our house annually and just
Mm-hmm.
check. And you mentioned something about, or you asked about testing, like the people that came initially, did they do air testing? Yeah. And I think the tricky part about mold in the body and mold in the home is that we always want one test that gives you all the information that you need to know, and that's just not a reality. Like,
Yeah.
a urine mycotoxin test is really helpful in a lot of ways, but
Mm-hmm.
you're not releasing, it's not gonna tell you necessarily if you have it. It's a good guide, you know, I and in your house, when people come in and just put an air sample, I mean, I have a couple of accounts with different testing labs, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
and you have an air machine, but there's a place for those things,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not just the only test that you do. And I think that
Yeah.
when you pick up the phone book and you call a mold place and you don't really have any information about how they're supposed to be doing it properly or whatever, a lot of people will just come plop their air machines in your living room and it'll be okay. And,
Yeah.
that could change the next day or in 4 hours, like what's coming through. But what they're not doing and not accounting for is that it's the mold, whether it's active mold growth or what
Right.
you might call dead mold, they're still producing mycotoxins. And so if you have a wall that's next to your bed, or it doesn't even have to be because we have HVAC systems that pull it, but if you have a wall that has old mold and
Yeah.
it's just sitting there lying dormant, it's still producing and can produce mycotoxins. And the air test machine is not going to pick that up. It doesn't test for that. And so that's why having a really good IEP, building biologist, whatever, come in and search. And they
Yeah.
not for mold, but they look for clues for mold and then they test. And so looking behind the walls and putting a hole in a wall and then doing an air cassette in the wall or
Right.
swabbing it and shipping it off. And so it's, yeah, to me, it's kind of like, if you have a health issue and you go to a Western doctor and they look at you and they're like, Tracy, you look great. You're well. And you're like, okay. And then the next time you go, they do a blood test or an x-ray. And then finally they do like a CAT scan or something. Like there's so many different ways and they're just,
Yeah.
this is the deep way. And you want to make sure that you're going all in and finding all the potential problems. I think, you asked something about maybe women who feel stressed or whatever. How do you communicate to them that this could be a problem? I think
Mm-hmm.
or communicate why this could be a problem. I think one of the interesting things about mold issues or SIRS, which is chronic inflammatory response syndrome, is it's considered a multi-system, multi-symptom illness.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times when people are just assuming that it's like an allergy or a respiratory or whatever, but when you look at people either living in the same home or even an individual with a lot of symptoms that don't seem to go together, I think that's the time to start looking for maybe mold or biotoxins as a root cause, because it basically is you have like this one woman I spoke to, just as an example, found mold. Thankfully, they were doing something in their basement, and people came up and said, she needed to get this mold situation fixed before anything else. Okay. So she was 60 years old, and she called me, and she was in tears. And she was so drastic. It was such a drastic difference. She said, a year and a half ago, I was perfectly fine.
Mm.
I'm on 9 medications. Her kidneys were not functioning properly. Her liver was not functioning properly. She was on medication for depression. She was having heart issues. Like, it was, and that to me was like the picture of it affects inflammation. Chronic inflammation affects any and all parts of your body. And so I just think it's something that's often overlooked. And it's not to be the person that always says every one of your symptoms is mold. But if you have these things that aren't going away and they're not being helped, any of those body systems can be manifesting a problem with the inflammation that these biotoxins can cause.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so symptom wide. It's like when people are just looking for the runny nose, they're missing 99% of what mold illness actually can do in the body. And it can masquerade and look like so many different things, which is what ends up keeping men and women on what feels like a rat race trying to solve an unknown problem. It's like I remember feeling like it's hard to fight a war when you don't know who your enemy is. And so it's almost so relieving when you do find mold as the culprit, because at least now you know what you're dealing with, even though it can feel so overwhelming and expensive and emotional and all the things. But now you at least know what you're trying to tackle.
I don't know about about what your thoughts are on this, but I just think that it's very helpful. I don't know. Seeing the kind of doctors that I see, I'm not ever really looking for a diagnosis. It's more of like, this is what you're dealing with, and this is maybe what you need in order to help help support your body in this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to know maybe what I have. I don't want to know, oh, well, you have rheumatoid arthritis, or you have hypothyroidism, or you have lupus, or you have whatever. What I love, what to say, to agree with what you're saying, I love knowing the why behind it instead of the what.
Yeah.
Because even getting a label, I think people will take something like, oh, well, you have chronic fatigue syndrome, or you have fibromyalgia, and then people just being okay with that and treating the symptoms and not helping the symptoms and not looking for the why behind it just kind of makes it feel like you could be just stuck there forever. And
Mm-hmm.
hope is that there is hope. And if you just keep digging and go, okay, so why do I have these? Why am I having these symptoms? And even if you get a diagnosis, why am I having these things? And I just think it's vitally important. Even like, I'm very thankful for functional med doctors who are looking at things like gut health and all of that, which is huge and like so different than even 10 or 15 years ago. But even at that, why is your gut causing problem? What's causing your gut problems, and the why? And so it's just always something I think that needs to be in the back of people's minds. Like, if I'm not getting better, if this isn't helping, this is just another place to look.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And there are so many symptoms that come from it that I always kind of describe it. We've heard the phrase root cause quite a bit, but the idea is like every body can express disease in an infinite number of ways, but there are really not an infinite number of root causes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like mold happens to trigger a large percentage of them, and thereby never neglecting that as a possibility of a root cause, or always being thorough in the examination of that being a possibility, at least wanting to rule that out. Because what I find is that by addressing mold in the body, you can, quote unquote, fix so many of those downstream issues.
Right.
And so it's one of those, like, instead of playing whack-a-mole with a whole bunch of little diagnoses, it's so widespread in how it affects the body that really, by detoxifying that correctly, we can address you bring the body into balance in so many other beautiful ways.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. Like, I mean, mold is, I feel like I've always addressed it, the mold aspect of it, and in the last couple of years, I love Dr. Richie Shoemaker, who's
Yeah.
more of stirs the whole. There are multiple biotoxins that can cause the same chronic inflammatory response, and so I think it's important to kind of keep those on the just in your back pocket as well. If somebody remediates their home and is still not getting better, I did do some genetic cheek swab testing, and
Yeah.
I have the mold gene. I have some Lyme issues, and they definitely go hand in hand. But I think what you said is so true. When you get rid of the mold issue, or
Yeah.
actinomycetes or endotoxins or whatever that it might be in your home that's causing that chronic response, I think
Yeah.
that, yeah, all of those other things, including issues like Lyme or other
Yeah.
actions, it enables your body to fight those like they weren't able to when it was bombarded with these toxins in it.
Exactly. Yes. Yep. It sort of cripples the body from dealing with everything in a way that it could. And if you remove that burden, then it often can handle things like Lyme disease or autoimmunity in a much better, smoother way.
And then that's the point at which you do, if you're not, some people get out and they're like clear up just very easily. And some still do need to go back and figure out, maybe do some more work to find what did that cause in your body that needs repair and help. And so, but then you're operating in a clean environment and you're not continuously being in this poison environment that's, I don't know. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, is there one thing that you wish you could communicate or you wish that every woman would know about this topic of mold issues? Is there one thing you would like to communicate to people?
Yeah, I think that if you are in it and you kind of start, that this is part of maybe a problem in your health journey or your family's, that you feel hope that you're not the only one experiencing it and that other people have done it, and there's a lot of support and help in that, and just much encouragement, because it can feel hopeless. But like you said, once you find that peace and you really start seeing that this could be, that this is helpful, it's amazing. If you've not, I would say that for someone who maybe is unfamiliar but deals with a lot of chronic things, I just would say explore it, because it could make a huge difference
Hmm.
in your health and then in your family's health. I just also hear so many stories of people who kind of fix their house because maybe one person was sick, and then all of a sudden these other issues with other family members that they never attributed to are helped or resolved. And it's just like, oh, wow,
Hmm.
this is amazing. And so it's clean air is just, it's so important.
Would you recommend people start with the testing their body or testing their home first?
Probably their home. I mean, if you're experiencing severe symptoms, I would probably do both. I mean, yeah. And testing your body and testing your home. There's many ways. My favorite thing, I feel like that's the easiest, if it's your body, is a urine mycotoxin test. Again,
Hmm.
so not always show everything, but the easiest, a good screening for SIRS is if you go to survivingmold.com. Dr. Shoemaker has a VCS test. It's a visual acuity test. I don't know if you've ever done that, Tracy.
Yeah, oh yeah, I have several times.
Okay. It's $15, and it gives you a screening, and then there's cluster symptoms, and you do the screening, you check off the symptoms, and if you have X number of this many, whatever. And I want to say, don't quote me on this, but like of their patients, it's like 96 or 98% accurate. If you fail it, you're in an inflammatory response. And it's just interesting the way that the inflammation affects the optic nerve that is
Hmm.
being used in this test. If it's being affected, the other parts of your body are also, and it's just showing that it is a chronic inflammatory issue. That's a good one because it's just so simple and cheap, and it's one that you can kind of gauge and do periodically over your healing process, as well as as
Yeah.
well as mycotoxin urine test. But yeah, there's doctors here who do good work with herbs. Sometimes people with SIRS may need to do things like cholestyramine or Welchol, which are the prescriptions that are on the Shoemaker protocol. But at least just start exploring it. It's a lot of information and it can feel overwhelming, but I think information and knowledge is a gift. And I just think when we have access to that and just going, oh, okay, this is going to take a lot to think through and figure out, but this is going to help. And I just think there's encouragement there. As far as the house goes, if you're an ERMI dust test is a history of everything that's ever gone on in your home. So it's not going to indicate, oh, I have an active water leak or whatever, but it's going to
Mhm.
show what is making you sick potentially. Because even if it was, here's my house of 100 years old, there could have been a water leak 50 years ago that's the wood still has all this dead stuff or this dormant stuff that's releasing particles of the mycotoxins. And so that's going to pick up and that's going to show you from a health standpoint what you're being exposed to. And
Yeah.
also keeping your eyes out, if you're at school or church or your job or whatever, are there issues that might be affecting you there? But again, if you can get your home really well taken care of, then your body gets to a point where it can withstand more and more
Yeah.
in the world where we can't control everything.
Right, because there'd be stories that I would come across on mold survivors, as they call them, online, and people couldn't walk into a Walmart or a Target without a mold hit. And then you worry about, can you ever go on vacation and stay in a hotel, or what about renting Airbnbs? You get hyper concerned about all the future environments you might encounter.
Oh yes, oh yes. And I think that's why you just have to again, when you mentioned going into a Walmart or a Target, the sensitivities, create stuff like multiple chemical sensitivities, and mine have gotten so much better with other there was a time essential oils and candles, and obviously there's a lot of candles that are toxic and they should bother you, but even healthy scented things, just super I was super sensitive to that, and that has definitely gone away. But I mean, I have a daughter who, she'll be like, okay, I can walk into this building and I feel it, and if I stay here for more than a couple hours I might get a headache. But
Uh,
even at that, like her issues were, we had a year with a school several years back when she was kind of at the height of it. She would get a headache we homeschool, but it was a 1 day a week thing. Headache, and hers were kind of like an internal vibration. She would just get
mhm.
shaky. And those were her in certain places within about an hour or so. She's like, I feel it. But that being said, once we started cleaning up her body and cleaning up her environment, she was able to go right, wrong, or indifferent. We could debate that, whether or not I should send her, but she could go into that environment and be okay. And so your
Yeah.
body is resilient and it is able to handle more of those things as you go. But you're still diligent. I mean, I'm going to a dance convention with my daughter in Orlando, and I'm checking out. There's mold groups. I'm checking out hotels because I have been one of those people that's made a hotel reservation and left it because I'm like,
Me
nope,
too.
here. And I think that's okay. I just, it used to stress me out, but I think it's no different than if people go into a restaurant and say, I can't eat gluten, and people are accustomed to dietary restrictions more now than they were a long time ago. It's like, look, this place makes me sick. I'm sorry, I have to leave.
Yes,
And that's fine. So give
exactly.
yourself grace and yeah, a lot of that. So
Yeah, and advocate for yourself at every single turn, because $150 a night hotel room is not worth weeks or months of headaches afterwards. It's happened to me before.
uh
Situations where I thought, oh, it'll be just fine. I'm not that way anymore, but when I was recovering, I was far more sensitive, and I can
yeah.
handle a lot more now. But at that sensitive time during the healing process, it was not worth any exposure.
And doesn't it also make you wonder, like, there's definitely more of an acute time of maybe being sick from this. I definitely know that there was, but it also, like, when I was just telling my story, it makes you look back years before and wondering about certain situations and going, oh, maybe that's why. Like when you weren't maybe 20 years ago, when you'd go stay in a hotel and you never thought twice about it,
Right.
feel bad the next day, it's just not even on your radar. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh gosh, I wish I wish this wasn't on my radar all the time. But I am thankful that it is.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Okay, with that said, let me ask you a question that I ask every person who I interview on this podcast, which is what is something that you do for your health every single day?
I would say I take a lot of supplements and I do take supplements every day, but I think with the whole, and this is, I'm a mom of five and a homeschooling mom of five, but now I'm only a homeschooling mom of one. So I have a little bit more time. And I think just being intentional about just going on a drive by myself or running down the street to the coffee shop and getting a coffee or just something little like that. It just helps me. I don't know. Helps feed, I guess people would say feed my soul. I don't know. Just makes it my day a little easier. And then I guess that was two things.
I love that. It's like I think of that those types of things. I love to do those things too. They like grow our mental margin.
Mm,
They give us space to decompress, to think, to not have something else on the to-do list, to not answer somebody's question, just to be.
yeah. And I feel like I've realized like I loved all my homeschooling years, but they're packed.
Hmm.
They're busy.
Hmm.
Always was a little bit afraid of when that slows down, what that's going to be like. And I miss a lot of it. But I also am realizing having that a little bit more of that time, I like more than I thought I would. Of
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
course. Thank you for this. I want to hear your story. That needs to be next.
Yeah, we'll do a part two and definitely compare because I feel like we've got a whole lot of overlap. I mean, my story goes back to my earliest memories was probably college years, living in old homes in very northern California where it rained constantly. Birkenstocks were a thing. I mean, they are now, but they were a thing originally back then. And I would have green mold grow on the surface of the cork overnight. And I would put my foot right into that sandal and wear it to school every single day and just thought, oh, how annoying. But I had no concept of what it was doing to my health. And I remember visiting the university health clinic over and over and over for sinus infections, and I'd never had one in my entire life. And that's really what it was at the beginning. And the difference that you pointed out, which I'm so thankful for, which is there's mold and then there's mycotoxins. And early on life exposures, it was growing this sensitivity to mold. But eventually, when my health gave out, it was full on mycotoxin, Sears inflammatory process where everything went haywire. So, yes, we'll talk about that part two.
Love it.
You started an Instagram page to help people find some information. What is that called?
It is called Mold Matters. It's mold_matters. It's kind of new. I feel like I've spent the last 2.5 years. My daughters always kind of laugh or roll their eyes when I'm on the phone when they realize, oh, she's talking about mold and call it a mold ministry. And so it's kind of been operated as just hey, I'm going to text you 20 different links or 20, these tests, or I have like several emails that I just kind of adjust depending on who I'm sending it to with all
Yeah.
this information. And so the idea is I need to just put it all in one place. So it's kind of new and upcoming, but send me a message or whatever. I don't know, I have a lot of information that's not even up there that I just kind of like to share if people have questions or just need to hear, yeah, from somebody who's gone through it.
Yep, yep. You know that saying, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. I feel like there is nobody better equipped to handle these types of issues than a mother. Because
Yes.
when we've seen our children suffer from a moldy environment, that a switch turns on in us and we become like the biggest mama bear there ever was. And we become an expert by passion, by necessity, almost overnight. And we research everything. So sharing with others who can benefit from that. And just think of all the time that you can help save somebody from having to do the research themselves by getting them the answers right away. So I love what you're doing and that you're helping others through your own journey. So thank you.
You're so welcome. No, and thank you for this and for what you share. It's actually very helpful. So
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on today, and we'll do a part 2 and we'll talk a little bit more about I could happily share my story and let's talk about what some practical things are that people can do. Because I run into so many people who are like, yeah, we'll just take some activated charcoal and we'll be fine. Or we just need some binders and we'll be fine. But it's actually much more complex than that.
a lot more complex, but it's not unattainable, and you can.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. There's a path forward. So, all right. Thanks for coming on today. And I will see you all next time in the Balanced Hormone Solution podcast.
Bye.
That's it for today's episode of the Balanced Hormone Solution podcast. If this resonated, don't just listen, do something about it. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And if you know another woman who's tired of feeling like a stranger in her own body, send her this way. For more support, check out the show notes. I've got resources to help you get started. Just remember, your body isn't broken. You just need the right tools. See you next time.